Okay, so this is the video on all things William Shakespeare and Romeo and Juliet. I just want to draw your attention to what's going on in his ear over here. I just think it's very kind of interesting and cool that guys in the 1500s had earrings. Just my thought. So, a little bit about Bill. In case you didn't know, Bill is short for William. They think that he was born on April 23rd, 1564, and they know that he died on April 23rd, 1616. How much does that stink to die on your birthday? The reason why they aren't entirely sure that he was born on April 23rd is because babies weren't born in hospitals because hospitals didn't exist. Therefore, birth certificates also didn't exist. The only record they have of babies in their early lives are their baptism records. And there was a big push to get them baptized within 2 to 3 days of life because most babies didn't survive that long. It was very rare for babies to live past infancy. So they were baptized really quickly so babies didn't get stuck in limbo or purgatory. So he was actually baptized on April 25th, which is why they think he was born on April 23rd. Now, he lived in a little village outside of London called Stratford upon Avon, but later in his life, when he became known as a playwright and he was performing and acting, he moved to London. He was married to a woman named Anne Hathaway, and it was actually pretty scandalous. She was 27, which was considered very old at the time to get married, and he was only 18. And when they got married, it was because she was pregnant. So, again, pretty scandalous for an 18-year-old to get married to his 27-year-old pregnant girlfriend, especially in the 1500s. They ended up having 3 kids, Judith, and also twins, Hamnet and Susanna. In his lifetime, he wrote 38 plays. Some of the more famous ones include Romeo and Juliet, which is what we're going to read, Hamlet, Macbeth, which you're probably familiar with, King Lear, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and Julius Caesar, which we'll read next year. In addition to writing 38 plays, he also wrote 154 sonnets. Now, this is all we have accounted for. London actually burned down a couple times during his lifetime, and so they think that some of his work may have gotten lost in those fires, but this is what we know that he has actually written. One of the theaters that he performed frequently in was called the Globe. He performed many of his plays here. There was also another one called the Rose and another one called the Swan, but it was an open-air theater on the banks of the Thames River in London. It looks like Thames, but it's actually Thames. Now, the Globe also burned down. A replica was rebuilt, not in the exact same spot, but in a close location. And you could actually go there today and see a play there. It's really, really fun. It was interesting why the Globe burnt down. It actually burnt down because during the time of Shakespeare, there were a couple different outbreaks of the bubonic plague. With their limited knowledge of medicine during that time, they believed that smoke kept germs away. We actually now know that smoke, when inhaled through the lungs, can act as immune system suppressant. But they believed that smoke kept those plague germs away, and so they would frequently set fires throughout London whenever there were large outbreaks of the plague, and those got out of hand. And since London at the time was built almost entirely out of wood and straw, it burnt to the ground. So the Globe, again, the original one is gone, but you can see a play in the replica. This is what the Globe looks like here. This is the new one that they built in I believe it was 1997 because I was a senior in high school. So it is a round structure. That's why they call it the Globe, because it's circular. It has a thatch roof that only covers the perimeter of the theater. And you see where it flattens out here on the top? That is open to the sky. At the time, that was necessary because they didn't have electricity. So if you wanted to see the play and see what the heck was going on, you needed to have that open air to the top so the daylight could shine in and light up the play. Here's a little bit more on the Globe. Everybody went to the Globe, from the richest of the rich to the poorest of the poor, and your social standing and your socioeconomic status determined where you sat. So the wealthy people sat in the seats around the perimeter, and the richer you were, the closest to the stage you sat. It actually blocked your view, but if you were rich, you wanted to be seen. So you wanted your seat to be close to the stage so everybody could see you. The poor people, we call them groundlings because they didn't even actually sit. They had to stand on the ground in front of the stage. And it got pretty nasty down there. If you've ever seen in old films or cartoons, people throwing fruits and vegetables at bad performances, that started during this time. The people in the groundling section smelled pretty bad. People, by and large, only bathed once or twice a year. They also would relieve themselves on the ground because there were no public restrooms at that time. So it smelled pretty bad down there. So, what the groundlings would actually do is they would purchase an orange before the play would begin. And if the smell got overwhelming, they would peel back a portion of that orange and they would sniff it. And then they would keep doing that as the smell got bad. But if the play was worse than the stench in the groundling section, they would take that orange and they would bean the actors and the actresses and hit them. It's pretty funny. Some other interesting facts on the globe include the fact that it was shut down a couple times by the Puritans. We call the Puritans pilgrims. We celebrate them here in the United States, but in England, they hated the Puritans. The Puritans wanted to purify the Christian religion, and they believed that dancing, singing, card playing, and theater, basically anything fun, was sinful. So they closed down the theater several times, and they would actually, when they got control of Parliament, jail actors, actresses, playwrights. Shakespeare makes fun of Puritans frequently throughout his plays. In his play Twelfth Night, there's a character named Malvolio. If you know anything about Spanish or French, mal means bad. So Malvolio was a Puritan and he was a bad guy. Shakespeare wrote 3 types of plays: comedies, tragedies, and histories. We think of comedy as just being funny, and they were lighthearted and fun, but the main definition of a comedy is that it ends with many of the characters getting married at the end of the play. Tragedy is just like it sounds. At the end of the play, almost everybody's dead. There's a big body count and heads do roll. Histories tell the story of the kings and queens of England and Europe. You'll read one next year called Julius Caesar. Romeo and Juliet is interesting in that it starts out fairly comedic, but it takes a tragic twist at the end. Now, there are a couple terms that we want you to know that have to do with drama. And an aside is, technically a convention in drama where a character addresses either the audience directly or another character directly, but the other characters on stage don't hear it. If you've ever seen Saved by the Bell, when Zach Morris calls time and everybody behind him pauses and he talks directly to the screen, that is kind of like an aside. So again, either the audience would hear the message or one other actor on stage would hear the message, but the other characters wouldn't hear it. A soliloquy is a long speech given on stage by a character who is alone, expressing private thoughts and feelings. Otherwise, you would just see them sitting there and standing there and staring off into space for a while, and that would be very boring. The way you remember soliloquy is that a character is solo on stage. Soliloquy, solo. Characters alone talking on stage. A monologue is similar. It's also a long speech given by one character on stage. The only difference is there are many other characters on stage. So that's how you remember it. Mono means one, log means speaker, one speaker, but mono also has many other people listening on stage. A pun is a play on words where they capitalize on multiple meanings of a pronunciation or meaning of a word, and it's supposed to make a joke. It's kind of punny. A paradox. A paradox is a statement that seems contradictory on the surface, like it doesn't make sense on the surface, but when you examine it more closely, there are some underlying truths. Think of the beginning of A Tale of Two Cities, where it says it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. On the surface, that doesn't seem to make sense, but during the French Revolution, it truly was the best of times for some and the worst of times for others. An oxymoron is not an insult for your younger brother or sister. It's a type of paradox where 2 contradictory words are side by side, like jumbo shrimp. A character foil is when you have 2 characters with vastly opposite character traits, and these opposite character traits are meant to highlight and exaggerate other traits of the characters. It doesn't necessarily mean that the characters despise each other or are in conflict with each other, they're just opposites. I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit more about drama, Romeo and Juliet, and William Shakespeare. Make sure you bring these notes to class and fill them out, and you can use them on your quiz. Have a great day.